directly, but I've known Michelle for several years professionally. She is an active member in her hometown of Middleton, which is obviously a member of the Masconomet district, and so worked well and closely with their folks as well as the Tri-Town. It was when you were doing your licensure that there's the regional manual that was, I think you all had a copy or saw a copy of it, and it had my name at the bottom, because I was definitely the least contributor, the smallest contributor to that process, but that was actually Michelle's effort during her licensure program. So she brings an incredible amount of experience to the table. She has been in the municipal world on the city and town side. She has been a business manager for the Stoneham Public Schools, and then most recently for Chelmsford. And I will say she was hesitant to walk away. It was a struggle in our discussions to walk away from a commitment at Chelmsford that she committed to 3 years, and she is in her first year. But I've known for a long time that Michelle wanted to be in a regional school district, and so it was a tough choice for her. But I'm glad she made the choice to apply. At the end of the day, we went through a very thorough process. Narissa was a representative from the committee. We had Gene Case representing the town of Newbury, as well as Kim was on the committee, and Al as another administrator, and then various staff from within our office. There were 16 applicants. We screened through and interviewed 8. And at the end of the day, I believe that Michelle is the right person. She's the right fit. It's the right time. So I offer this recommendation without reservation. Obviously, it's a recommendation from the superintendent, and then you as the committee have to approve the recommendation if you see fit. So that is my recommendation.
Could we have a motion to approve Michelle Cresta as the school business administrator for the Triton Regional School District?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Congratulations. You're official.
It's a very tough committee. Hello, you don't have any questions for her? You want to grill her a little something?
Paul does. Paul has a
I do
question.
have a question, Michelle. I'd like to give you your first bit of work for Brian, because obviously you caught the tail end of the conversation, and we talked about a bond premium payment, and Brian was a little bit unsure about that, so if you could just, in the morning, fill him in on that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
With that, yes.
You're very red.
I appreciate that, Paul. I do.
That's what it is, Brian.
I've never seen your face so red.
I was just going to comment to say I was happy to see your volunteer positions and that you serve on your town's finance committee. So you have seen both sides of the school budget from the town perspective as well as...
Yes, I have, and especially being a finance committee member in a region for the past 7 years, so extremely familiar with that process and dealing with it on a weekly basis.
It's perhaps a silly question, but when do you start?
July 1.
Thank you.
I was nervous. I wasn't sure what Paul was going to ask.
Okay.
Not to say that
If you could just do that pro bono, that little project for us for tonight and tomorrow morning.
My door is always open to Brian.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Easier than I thought. I thought that'd be meaner.
No, you don't have, yeah, I mean, you come on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
The only other thing, I have getting my National School Board Administration flyers and things like that, so that's coming up for Paul and Monique in just a couple of weeks, so look forward to hearing about that. Is there any agenda items proposed for future meetings or any items of an urgent nature to be considered at tonight's meeting?
Not so much tonight's meeting, but I was just hoping in the future. I had asked Mr. Farmer at one of our earlier meetings about getting an update on the scheduling issue, and it sounds like the middle school, high school scheduling issue is really coming to the forefront. So if we could kind of drill down on that, I think that'd be helpful.
I'll make sure we get that on the April. Okay? Thank you. Next, reports and deliberations. This seems like we perhaps have done this tonight.
Yes, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's anyone here who wasn't at the DCC meeting, but for the the benefit of the audience, it may benefit going briefly through the information. So again, by way of an update, we continue to look at the current cuts that we've proposed to arrive at the tentative budget. We had identified four main areas. It was the reduction of the math specialist from 3 to 1, reduction of foreign language at the middle school, 4 elementary classroom teachers, and the instructional technology specialists, so that it was a shared position with the librarian, reducing 3 folks. We continue to review those. I don't think we're ready to say we have the perfect plan yet, but as far as the math specialists, we're working on a plan that rather than reducing from 3 district to 1, sorry, 3 at 1 at each school to 1 district shared, it would actually provide a half-time at each school, so that rather than a reduction of 2, it would be a reduction of 1.5. For foreign language at the middle school, as Paul referenced, we're still continuing to have the discussion about the schedule. I think that even though we can have a more detailed discussion in April, it will be a topic of discussion next week when we talk about the budget, because there's going to be some intersection there. That still continues to be reviewed. The best possible option for foreign language, if there's a way to keep it a core rather than elective, that's certainly the preferred option. As far as the instructional technology folks, again, still haven't come to the perfect solution. It comes down to the specialists, and again, with decreasing student population, eventually we're going to have to talk about reducing. But to reduce art, music, PE, and library across the board means affecting 15 people versus creating 1 shared position for the library and technology. Again, the focus is on the least worse. This is not a good scenario, but at this point, I think if we were to say we have to decide right this second, I think we would say that the majority of folks believe the ITS is the change we would make. And then the final was the reduction of elementary classes. It still remains to be seen. There were some that, in some schools, where it made sense that it might be a special education teacher rather than a classroom teacher. So those numbers continue to, or those discussions still continue to happen. So we keep saying we have a little more time, so we have until next Wednesday, and we'll certainly have meetings and discussions Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and be able to provide you a final recommendation by next Wednesday. So that is where we stand in regards to the current cuts as they've been proposed. Other than those, there have been no changes to the budget. So if I take you to the sheet that was passed out tonight, we have, I'll take you to the bottom, the blue box first. The PEC has been negotiating for several months. That is with all of our public employees, the representation from all associations. They have been very reasonable coming to the table. We were able to negotiate down to a 0% increase with 2 competitive groups. We have both Tufts and Blue Cross through Maya, our current plan, at the table. It's the current recommendation after several meetings to stay with Maya and then further refine the plan that provides an additional $113,000 in savings, and that's strictly through plan design. It's technically still an executive session as it's being ratified, I believe, a week from today by the associations. And so hopefully it's been very favorable, very positive. Folks have been very reasonable around the table. And I think we have a plan that provides significant savings and still provides a very reasonable benefit. Beyond that, we have identified a student who has been newly identified that will be aging out in the fall. That would save both transportation as well as the IA assigned to that student. There is a change in some nursing requirements that is actually going to be a larger savings this year, so we're assuming a chunk of that we'll be able to save next year. That could change, but at this point that's a $20,000 in savings, $20,000 savings. And then this may have changed since I put this on paper earlier this afternoon, but the math specialists, as I said, this is literally a work in progress. The latest scenario may have absorbed a little bit of that savings, or some of the staffing may have changed, but that was showing a $15,000 savings to actually add a 0.5 FTE back just based on various staffing situations. And then the wild card there that we don't have a number to yet is we did offer an early retirement incentive. Any teacher who is 25 or more years that it's a $20,000 incentive payment. They have to retire actively through MTRS. So at this point, we do have folks who have come forward. We've actually allowed people who have 23 or more years to apply, and have said, depending on how it works through, if we can offer that same incentive to folks at the 23-year mark, we would do that as well. But it would have to be a jump to 23 years, which invites several more people into the fold, and it becomes an issue of affordability. So my guess is that there will be savings there. Exactly how much, I can't say confidently, but it could be significant savings. It could be upwards of 100,000. It could end up being 20,000, depending on the folks who keep. I think the question was, have there been any bites? And there's certainly been a lot of nibbles, lots of nibbles and some bites. So the question will be, how many of those folks actually apply by Monday, which is the deadline? So that yields a savings of 189,000 and change over what we proposed in the tentative budget. That's a change in a reduction in expenditures. We also are going to get a little more aggressive in both regional transportation and Chapter 70. There's been a lot of discussion about regional transportation. Mars is using the figure of 70% reimbursement. I'm going to latch on to that and say 70%. That gives us an additional $40,000 as a revenue. And then we've had the discussion extensively in regards to Chapter 70 aid, and the reality is that we will not see any increase in aid unless it's the minimum per pupil aid. There have been proposals from MASS and MASC in the MMA ranging from 100 to 125 per pupil. That's not going to be feasible, we know that, but there seems to be several folks, Senator Tarr, Representative Hill, have talked about $30, increasing from $20 to $30 per pupil being a fairly, maybe not likely, but certainly a much more feasible number. So if we change that to $30 per pupil and make that assumption, it gives us an additional close to $25,000. The change in the Blue Cross is just because the retiree payments are set as a revenue. The reduction in the premiums actually reduces the amount of revenue from retirees. So that increases that gives us an additional $59,000 and change in revenues. So netted together, it decreases the town assessments. Newbury is decreased by $74,000 and change, Rowley by $81,000 and change, and Salisbury by $92,000 and change. And we can now report that the discussion previously in the previous hour was with the District Communication Committee, and I believe I can say in summary that the towns were very supportive of these numbers. It sounds as though around the table there's unanimous support for these figures. Obviously, there could be additional savings, and obviously the towns would love to see that those yield additional savings, not any restorations. But I think we have a plan that allows us to stop the bleeding where we're at this point. So, unless there are any questions.
Paul?
Brian, I just have a question. Has the P&N committee raised the issue of the split between the district and the employee and what they pay for the health insurance? Has that issue been raised with the union?
Yes, and I believe there's still executive session, but I can tell you it absolutely has been raised. Yes. Yes. So I just would state that the issue of premium plan design, all of that can be forced. The split is negotiable. So.
Just so the public understands, when you see additional revenues coming in, a lot of people might be saying, well, why aren't we restoring things? And it was very clear from our meetings with the towns that the affordability of the assessments was an issue before we were able to reduce it more. So as much as we would have loved to have put services back in, had we done that, they were not going to afford those original assessments, and we could have put the entire budget at risk, I think, so.
Absolutely.
That's true, and as a result of that, all three towns feel that they will support the budget as it has been presented.
Which is very positive.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Brian?
Not so much a question, but I just want to make clear, just for the public, that for an hour before this meeting started, we met with all the town officials.
Yes.
We went extensively over the budget and about the other topic of the stadium redevelopment. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks, Paul. And that's That's what Robin was referring to also, and what I meant too. This was just before this meeting started, that we did go over all this information, and we did get very good support from all three towns. Any other budget questions? No? Okay.
So we will come back next week, obviously.
will.
with
We will have a meeting
final
next
proposal and be
Wednesday.
ready for you to vote a budget.
7 o'clock. Stadium redevelopment, to receive a report on the development of the stadium redevelopment contract. A lot of developments in there.
There's a lot of developments. So I will also say that there are some numbers that changed in this report since October, but I'm very pleased to hear very, very positive support from all three towns in regards to the stadium project. This is going to mean that it's not going to cost the towns any more. It's just going to be that it's going to be payable over 15 rather than 20 years, which obviously increases the cost per year. But all three towns did speak very, very clearly and definitively that we've come this far and we need to get it done, and so let's move forward. So certainly appreciative of that. Given the fact that that information was received tonight, that's certainly a positive step. I still am not ready to make a recommendation because of the fact that there is the outstanding issue with the wastewater treatment plant, that I would love to just have some sense of any potential liability there before I can say to you, let's move forward with a $4 million project. So just as far as the timing, it will be this timing that I propose, where I will come back to you on Wednesday night to propose that we award according to this information. So again, we opened bids on Friday, March 11th. Gale Associates is our engineer. They've managed this process with us throughout the past, since 2012. We had 5 submittals for the site work, and we had 3 submittals for the amenities building. David White and Sons, who did Newburyport, they did Pentucket, and they recently completed Linfield, was the low bidder for the field work. And GTC Construction from Haverhill was the low bidder for the amenities building under Chapter 149. So my recommendation when I come back next week, because of the financials of the situation, will be that I'm going to recommend that we award the base bid for the field to David White and Sons, but we call out deduct number 1, which removes the press box and the lift. Those are items that, as you'll see with the numbers, we can't afford now, but they're items that are very easily added back. It's almost like an erector set, where it's custom off-the-shelf press boxes that would then attach to the bleachers. Obviously, it's a little more work than I'm saying, but it's not. We don't lose anything by not doing it now. And obviously, as we said to the towns, we're still pursuing other folks who would like to have a name on the press box. If anyone's listening and would like your name on the press box, it only costs $179,500.
Have your own press box.
So that is my recommendation will be to award it with that deduct. Everything else is in the pad that we spent lots of time talking about for safety. The bleachers are there, the building in its entirety, and then again in the design, really the only thing we took out was the 6-foot perimeter fence around the entirety of the complex. The 4-foot pedestrian fence, everything else remained intact. So that's obviously very positive. So again, timeline, we'll come with a recommendation next week. They would start construction on the 11th. The set date, according to the contract, would be August 21st. There is a clause in there for $500 a day in liquidated damages. That is easy to say, a lot harder to execute, but I believe we have a very aggressive on-site clerk of the works in Chris Walsh, who will love to keep them accountable, and so we'll move forward. David White has in the recent past, one of the concerns raised by references was the timeliness of completion, so we will make sure we do our best to keep it on track. So the stadium, technically, according to the schedule, would be done on August 21st without any cost overruns. I believe the athletic director currently has it not scheduled until September 15th, just being a realist. But it will definitely be open this fall, certainly by Thanksgiving, and we'd have the Thanksgiving game, thanks to Pentucket, who had 2 years in a row, and now we get it this year.
And 2 years in a row.
In 2 years in a row. So, and again, in talking through details with the towns, there's a lot of information about bonds and bans that I don't think is necessarily particularly of interest to the public, but I think that the money piece, the revenue analysis is where we'll be bonding 3.2. 600,000 comes from the bank, the Institution for Savings. 550,000 will be set aside because they will purchase the scoreboard and PA system separately. The rest of the groundwork and wires and conduit for all of that is included in the project. TEF raised 110,000, and then we're using 175,000 out of gate receipts. That gives us a total available revenue of $4,035,000. Gale Associates contract with all change orders is at $178,260, and that carries us right through construction. That's not all been paid. The track and field site, again, with the base plus deduct 1, is $2.735 million. The amenities building is $1,019,185, and then the short-term interest band costs is about $32,000. That's $3.964 million. That leaves us only a contingency of $70,000. My proposal next week will be to pay the band costs out of the building rental revolving account, which gives us a contingency of a little above $100,000. On the next page, there's no engineer that would tell you go into a project with a couple percents of your total project cost and contingency. The recommendation is at least 5 and preferably 10%. That would mean we would need to carry between $185,000 and $375,000 in contingency. We don't have that. The reality is if we don't run into any problems and don't need the contingency, we bond $100,000 less. If we need the contingency, we bond 3.2 as we planned. If we needed more than the $100,000, my recommendation will be that we, and the towns were supportive of this, that we borrow more because of the vote from the committee as well as the town's vote, appropriated up to $4 million to borrow. Obviously, we've said we're going to use 800 in offset and only borrow 3.2. But if we needed to borrow more, we could, bond, call it another 200,000, 3.4. And then the difference of $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per year costs for those bonds, we could use those as we would cover those in our operating budget, and there would obviously need to be an assumption there that it's not just inflating the operating budget, but that we would have to cover those in our operating budget. Again, that wouldn't be until fiscal 18, so that gives us an opportunity to budget for that. So that is a plan that allows us to move forward with these numbers, award the contract, and then manage it from there. Hopefully we don't need contingency, but the field is completely filled in farmland, so we don't know what's under there. So then the big change, again, is the fact that we found out very recently that legally we cannot bond, even after several years of talking with our bond advisors about bonding for 20 years. We cannot bond for 20. We have to bond for a maximum of 15. So that is going to increase the cost for the towns. But again, as Paul mentioned, spoke in great detail with the towns tonight. They understand the numbers. They understand the increase. They understand it's a change. It means different things for different towns because Rowley passed an override, so that doesn't affect their operating budget. Newbury and Salisbury both chose at town meeting to absorb those costs in their operating budgets. So it's obviously more of an impact on Newbury and Salisbury than it is on Rowley. But nonetheless, it's obviously an impact for everyone. So, but I'm very pleased to say that all three towns were very supportive of this. So assuming we button up that one outstanding issue with the wastewater treatment plant, or at least I have some sense of where that's heading, by next Wednesday, we'll bring this to you as a formal recommendation with a draft contract ready to go.
Any additional questions on the stadium information? Paul?
Sorry, Brian, on just on the award of this contract, do we have to go with the lowest number
We do.
by law?
By law. So
And
that's
so-
a good question.
So the Gale, you had referenced earlier that the Gale Associates, did they put together a letter about the bids that came in? And can you just summarize that for us a little bit?
So what they do is we're paying them for their time. We say take the lowest two bids and assess those both. So again, a bid is awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible. Responsive is, did they pay attention to every detail that we gave them so that their bid accurately reflects exactly what we want? So that's responsive. Responsible is, what's your track record? Do you come in on time? Do you come in on budget? Do you offer a change order every other day? Both Quirk and Quirk was the second lowest. They did Georgetown, and White and Sons, David White and Sons, was the lowest. Both came in with good recommendations. Both do high quality work. There wouldn't be a concern with either of them in regards to the quality of the product that remains there. The question was, there was some response that Quirk is a little bit more bent towards offering change orders. White and Sons not so much, but they tend to be, in recent projects, they've been delayed. Obviously, there's debate about what causes a delay. When you're dealing with a historic building and stadium in Newburyport, that's obviously a much different project than a wide open field. So at the end of the day, Gail did offer that reservation saying about timing, but I don't believe it's enough that we can say we need to spend $75,000 more to go with Quirk. For the building construction, the two lowest were GTC out of Haverhill and then Mill City Construction, which is based out of Lincoln, Rhode Island. Heck of a commute. They were about 75,000 higher, and about 120,000. I'm sorry, about 120,000 higher. They both had good references. Mill City's, there's it's called DCAM. And it's a state organization that rates, that you have to be certified, a DCAM certified to do a public bid, Chapter 149 public project. Both of them had good DCAM ratings. Mill City's was better than GTC's. The references, again, raised some questions about overall management, timing, coordination, because again, as the GC, your job isn't to do the work, it's to manage all the subs. So there were some questions raised, but again, for 120,000, I don't know that I could recommend let's spend another 120,000 and then that makes it easier for us. I mean, the reality is both of these, we have to manage them well. So we can, if we deem a bidder not responsible, we can reject their bid and go with the one with a bid that is higher. However, we open ourselves up to bid protests. So in the case of David White and Sons, I have every expectation the project will go well, it'll be done perfectly, and if it's a week late, it's a week late. But if we didn't award it and there was a bid protest, we could be 2 months before we start. So the reality is, do you have to take the lowest bidder? Yes, unless you have a reason, and I don't believe we have a reason that would hold up.
So, I'm sorry, but I just have one other question, Brian. You referenced Chris Walsh is going to be our man on the scene, and he's a wonderful district employee, but quite seriously, does Gale Associates do monitoring of the project during the course of this? I mean, do they come out and, I'm concerned about change orders, I'm concerned about timing?
Absolutely. They are still on site. They still manage the process. They are not a clerk of the works per se. Generally, a field project like this, you don't have one because of the fact that, if you're building a building, you have a separate OPM, owner's project manager, you have a separate clerk of the works because you're talking about significant change. The reality is when you're doing earthwork, it's pretty straightforward. The carpet, the infill, the track, it's a fairly straightforward process. And then the building it's a shell. It's $1 million paying at prevailing wage, but it's a 2,800 square foot shell with restrooms. So the reality is you don't have to pay a clerk of the works or an OPM, and we chose not to save money. So between Chris Walsh and I, again, Gail is here on site. If we wanted Gail here every day, Gail would be more than happy to send someone and bill us. The reality is we would have biweekly meetings with both project managers and GCs, and those updates would be done. I guarantee Chris will take weather condition pictures. It'll be the most documented project on the North Shore.
Good information.
That's right.
Anyone else? All right, so next Wednesday night, we have a special meeting at 7 o'clock right here. 2 important votes will be taken. One will be for sure on the budget, and we're hopeful that we will also take a vote on the stadium. If there's nothing else, could we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Good evening.
Michelle, this is how short all the meetings are.
Yeah.